Hello, and welcome to our latest episode of Session Share, the Coaches Podcast. My name's Craig Birtwistle, and today is a roundtable discussion, and I'm joined by Josh Tilley here. How are you doing today, Josh?
I'm well, thank you. All good. How are you?
Doing really well. So today's topic is all about the academy product, looking at professional academies, how they operate, and how they coach within the game. Josh, you're a friend of the show and you've been on this podcast before. We spoke a little bit briefly about some of your duties and your involvement in and around the world, and how you've worked with many academies. Can you remind our listeners the academies that you've had the fortune of working with?
So I've been involved with Juventus Academy out in Kuwait, who have kind of been running for about 3 or 4 seasons now. And then when I was at West Ham, I was had a under 11s performance academy, which was kind of the step off the academy, but like a strong connection with trying to get players involved. And then I've been kind of when I was working at Norwich, kind of went up and got to watch and shadow a few of the sessions. I was kind of with a different department, but got to see how they run and had lots of CPDs and stuff like that up there.
Fantastic. So, Josh, when you work with these clubs, like how much are they involved in each and every lesson that you do? And are you involved in the creating of like the curriculum, or is it simply that it's like a handed down from above?
So basically, every club that I've worked for have their own kind of philosophy or DNA or how they want their sessions to look, what things they want to do, how they want their sessions to look. And then it would be on the coach to develop the sessions within their own how they see the game, how they want to coach their players. Obviously, if you're doing a specific team, you would kind of tailor your sessions around what suits your team, but kind of also matching the club's philosophy, if that makes sense. So it's kind of trying to blend the both together, which has been my experiences with wherever I worked.
Yeah, that was similar to me. I worked for Liverpool in New Jersey in America, and we had a regular meeting with the club. It was like once a month. We also had the access to like curriculums, and we had to like kind of do a review at the end of each month as if to say like this is working, this is where our level is currently. Is that the sort of thing you were getting?
Yeah. As in, you mean they were kind of checking if your sessions were up to scratch?
Yeah, pretty much. We were in the evaluation process. Yeah.
Yeah. We kind of most of the clubs that I've been at, it was kind of reviewed at every half term stage. So um, obviously, what happened a lot in the half terms is either the players have a complete week off, or if you have teams and stuff, you go into games. But it meant kind of the coaches had a little bit more time, so then the reviews would come in. Then obviously we'd review ourselves, review the sessions and the setups, and obviously then review the players. So normally happened every say 6 to 7 weeks. Obviously, as a coach, you're kind of reviewing and doing your own reviews on a session basis or a weekly basis, and you obviously might speak to maybe your line manager or people above. But as a kind of a pack of coaches, it was probably every 6 to 7 weeks.
Fantastic. What's the aim for an academy? Do they talk to you directly about pushing players towards the first team? Is it financially driven? Can you give us some insight of what they're trying to get from all these different academies that appear all over the globe?
I guess it depends where it is. So, for example, in England, the academies that I work with in England, or the clubs that I've worked with, um, I guess the main aim or goal or objective would be able to try and create players that can go and play in the first team. That would be the outstanding goal. But obviously, the depending on the level of the team, for example, if the team's in the Premier League, the standard of players that you need for that level, it's obviously not as easy said than done. But I guess to try and any player that kind of goes through the academy and then goes on to have a professional career at whatever level, that's seen as a success in the academy environment. You can't base your success of every academy player, I guess, getting into the first team, because it obviously doesn't work like that, especially with the demand and money and everything like that in the top leagues, especially now. So the ones in the UK have definitely been more trying to get as many players through the system and then have a professional career. When I've been abroad, it's probably been a slightly different message. It's probably been more like trying to create an environment where kids come and enjoy and just love playing. Like for example, if I look at my time in Q8, the academy was fairly new, starting up, and obviously maybe football wasn't as big as what it was or is now. So like it's constantly growing, and they're getting more and more players through the doors every year, every term. So their kind of setup is shows that it's working. So um, yeah, I would say when I was in Q8, it was probably more leveled at getting as many players through the door and kind of on their football journey, wherever they're starting, whatever age. And then obviously as the years go on, they can try and make it more and more professional. Um, so yeah, that was the aim from when I was in Q8.
Going back to what you said about the English model, I think now more than anything, the development of young players is actually exceptionally important. Not necessarily from a point of view, like I'm an Aston Villa fan, and I love the fact that like Jack Grealish came through our academy. We've got Jacob Ramsey currently. We got lots of players that have come through. And as a football fan, you're a Chelsea fan yourself, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So as a football fan, like we love it when one of our own makes it through the ranks and it's like a success story. Like Jacob Ramsey, for example, is from Great Bar, the exact town that I'm from. So it's
Okay.
a real feel good factor and it seems like a connection to the team. But one of the things that's happening now is the fact that with FFP, your youth players are now really credible based on the financial package they can bring. So, for example, when we sold Jack Grealish, it was 100 million straight in the pocket. There was no percentage that was taken away because he was a homegrown player. Due to this, our academies focusing a lot more, do you feel, on youth academy, on their academy setup, mainly because, say, for example, a Yeovil town or something like that, like that, them selling a world class player could keep them going for many, many years.
Yeah.
So, is it? Do you think it's mainly more focused now on developing because there's a chance of a big profit, or do you think it's more about the first team, or does it depend on the club?
It's a good question. I think being I'd say a proper football person, I'd like to think it kind of pretty depends on the club. I'd like to think it's more obviously trying to get players into the first team, but I do think you're right in the sense that especially clubs that are maybe lower part of the championship, maybe League One, League Two, obviously if they get a player through their academy that has got unbelievable talent and a kind of a top championship or a Premier League club want to sign, then like you say, if they sell them for 10, 15, 20 million, that's kind of massive money for a club like that. And unfortunately, um, that's the way it's going to go. Obviously, for the player as well, the player is going to want to progress. I think in the Premier League, I'd like to think clubs would still see as their like if they get a player or two through into their first team, they would kind of like be the star of their team, and that they would be like their best player. Like for example, if I look at Arsenal now with Saka, um, he's obviously come through the academy and now he's their best player. So I don't think Arsenal would be looking at any time to try and sell him. But again, unfortunately, with financial restrictions and stuff like that, sometimes clubs might be placed or put in a place where selling um, a player obviously is 100% profit to them, and that helps them pay like the bills and everything that they need to do.
Because it's a funny one now because it's a case of we wanted our clubs to invest in youth academy in their academies to grow players through the ranks to get our own like coming through, and it was mainly because then you wouldn't have to do a transfer fee.
Yeah,
So it was meant to be to save the club money. So now it was a case of like we're going back many, many years now. I remember there was a Aston Villa Chelsea game, believe it or not, where Villa were the first team to play. It was a full English 11 versus a full non-English 11. So, and it was one of those things that was debated at the time. It's like, well, all the homegrown players are leaving the game. Now it's like we're encouraging them to leave our club just because we get 100% of that profit coming in. It seems like it's gone a little backwards to me, and it's a case of now we're selling our best players, best homegrown talent, I should say, in order to not get the fines, to not get the punishment of minus points. And then you look at, say, like a team like Nottingham Forest, where they took the risk of going for minus points,
Yeah.
and it's actually benefited them, and now they could be most likely are heading towards Champions League football. Do you see that as an issue that needs to be addressed in the Premier League?
Yeah, something definitely needs to be addressed. I think with the money side of it, it's definitely gone. I think it has gone too far. I don't think a club um, should be in a position where they have to sell, for example, a youth academy player to like meet the needs of something like that. And also, you kind of want it to get more on a level playing field. I think um, when you have a look at the amount certain clubs spend compared to others and everything like that, I just think it becomes it's obviously becoming harder and harder for teams, for example, coming up from the championship. Um, as proven in the last two seasons and this season as well, they go straight back down. Um, and just because like makes the Premier League become less. Obviously, the Premier League is really competitive, but in that sense, the Premier League was always the best league because you never knew necessarily. You know that maybe three or four teams would be up there competing for the league, but then it would be the same down at the bottom. Whereas now you're coming to the end of the season, probably for the last 2 months, you've known Southampton and Leicester are probably going down, and obviously I don't think Ipswich is mathematically done yet, but basically gone as well. So yeah, I think it's causing problems in that side.
Very true. This is a fantastic conversation, Josh. We're just going to have a short break, courtesy of our message from Zencaster.
Do you have a story to tell that the world needs to hear? Have you struggled with reaching new audiences who are engaged with your story? It might be time for you to start a podcast. Let me tell you about a platform we use here at Session Share. Zencaster makes it super easy to produce a high quality broadcast with 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes ums, ahs, you knows, and 22 other speech patterns. Zencaster makes it super easy to produce a podcast that sounds great. Ready to tell your story? Check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencaster.
Welcome back, and we're talking about high level development that goes on inside each and every day inside the professional academy. I've had the pleasure myself to visit some of the great academies and talk to many of the top coaches like Josh himself with his thoughts and opinions on developing players. I've heard stories, and without naming names, that lessons are based on sole players that are, say, their golden goose, if you will. I've heard of clubs that only want to develop number 10s, the attacking midfielders, because they feel that's where all the money is when they can sell them on. Josh, obviously, without throwing any names under the bus or anything like that, have you heard of any of these scenarios, and are they commonplace?
Um, Personally, I haven't really heard anything in the sense of just trying to develop one specific position. Kind of the clubs I've been in and around kind of have four or five say key weapons that they're looking for in players, and normally they're looking for maybe an outstanding finisher, for example. So if someone's an unbelievable goal scorer, um, they might take the chance on bringing them into the academy because they believe that they can then work on the other areas, and in their team and their coaches are good enough to develop the player in the other areas. So they'll take the gamble on the fact that they're a proven like really good goal scorer, good at shooting maybe with both feet or something like that. Or it might be um, they are, say, decent at two or three things. So, for example, where you might be a 7 out of 10 in three areas, they'll bring them into the academy to obviously then trust in their setup and their process that they can get them to an 8 or a 9 out of 10 in them areas and also develop the other areas as well. I do believe where teams now have obviously certain philosophies and DNA and stuff like that, they might obviously have specific attributes that they look for in certain positions, but I don't think they would necessarily just pinpoint one area, and it's like trying to create as many of them as they can. I would have thought it's still to try and get the players in their best position, or what they see as their best one or two positions.
It's really interesting. You talk about how the fact that, like, obviously the academies are in team driven, so you've got like U16, U14, U12, and so on, right? When you're coaching inside that team environment and you talk about them looking for, say, a goal scorer and then trying to perfect the other parts of their game, whether it's their hold up play, it's their connectivity, or something along those lines, because they've seen one aspect that they think is exceptional and trying to kind of polish the shape, if you will. So when you get someone like that in a team dynamic, how does the academy go about really focusing on the individual? Do they pull a group aside and say, like, we're only going to work with the strikers, we're only going to work with the fullbacks, or something along that? Or is there something else that they do?
Kind of a bit of a mix, really. Obviously, the higher the age group you go up, obviously they'll probably be having match days, so it'll be specific to when their match day is, and working backwards in that sense. A lot of clubs and session groups now work in units, so they will split off. So a coach will take the attackers, a coach might take the midfielders, a coach might take the defenders, for example, or they might have certain spells during the week, which is just individual, like specific sessions, or it might be, for example, that they have a group session and then they do something extra with a couple of players after the session. So a lot of coaches, a lot of teams do it differently. I think it's important to try and find the mix and the balance, because obviously at the end of the day, football's a team game, so you still need the team to gel and perform. And obviously at academy level, results aren't seen to be like the main focus. It's obviously the development of the individuals and the players, but obviously still you want to try and put a competitive team together to try and get noticed, I guess. Obviously the FA Youth Cup is quite a competitive tournament that clubs want to go and do well in, and obviously try and get as many players pushing up and knocking on the door of the first team, really.
When you've worked inside these academies, like, I've always explained to coaches whether the level that you coach at, do you need to be proactive or reactive? Proactive being the fact that you develop a curriculum over a certain amount of weeks, a certain amount of months, maybe even a year, where you're delivering certain practices, certain times of the week, certain times of the month to help develop the overall player. Whereas reactive, like in America, for example, when they go to high school, you're looking at basically you watch a game, you see the weakness, you address the weakness in your next practice. In the academy setup, in particular England, and you could talk about your experiences around the world as well, at what age do they start being more reactive, where they'll see a game, they'll say, you know what, we were bad at pressure cover balance today, we've got to address that on certain practice. At what point do they stop being reactive and more proactive? Proactive rather than reactive.
Good question, really. I would say probably anywhere from 16s upwards, the games probably become more meaningful. Obviously, the players are older, so it's focusing on the kind of game that's coming up and stuff like that. I don't believe that. Obviously, I think they'll do their job in the sense of looking at the opposition and stuff like that. But I still feel in the academy setup and any of the clubs that I've been around, the main focus is still on what they do as a team, rather than being reactive to maybe saying that we were really bad at this, or we've watched the opposition and they're not very good at that, for example. I think a lot of teams work in blocks, so they'll have different units or on blocks what they'll work in, especially in the younger ages. And then, probably like I said, probably 16s upwards is probably where you become a little bit more reactive to what you're seeing in the games, obviously, because they come a little bit more competitive and a little bit more meaningful. Does that make sense?
Makes absolute perfect sense. It's definitely something that I've wanted to stress to a bunch of coaches, because when I've done coach education, I've spoke to coaches and they've been a case of, oh, but last week we were terrible at shooting, we couldn't hit a barn door. So we went straight on shooting, and then the following week now they're working on 1v1 defending, and it seems like it's all over the place, and it's so hard to teach a young kid how to do something if you keep jumping in and around.
Yeah.
So it's very important to me the fact that obviously there's greater minds than me that work inside these academies and obviously like that. So I just wanted to get a feel of when it was the most important to start developing. And I would say U15, U16 was the perfect age group for that.
The thing is, as well, is obviously if you're part of a pro academy, you're probably training 3-4 times a week and a game. So the coaches are getting to see the players a lot more. So it's a lot easier. Whereas obviously if you're working grassroots level, semi-pro level, um, if you're only seeing the players once a week, twice a week, then like what you said, you can't just keep reacting off a game because then the team's never going to get better in one area. That's something I really learned on my UEFA B. The coach educators were really clear and good about that in the sense that, like, for example, at the time, the under 18 team that I was doing, I only had them once a week for training. So if I was just reacting to a game every week, we were never going to get any better in a specific area really because we were just reacting all the time. So that UEFA B process really helped me in the sense of that I blocked it out. So we've done 4 weeks blocks, and we would kind of obviously I'm only getting 4 sessions within the month, but obviously for them 4 sessions we're kind of working on the same topic, and then hopefully you start to see little bits of improvement in the games, and then you kind of go on to the next block, if that makes sense. So overall, across the season, you're hitting different areas rather than constantly just reacting to. Obviously, in certain scenarios, you might have to react a little bit, and obviously the higher you go, and you start looking at the oppositions and stuff. But I guess it all depends on levels, really.
100% agree. Josh, we're just going to take a short break and we'll be right back.
Do you need fresh ideas for your football, soccer training? Then follow Session Share on YouTube and X. Our handles can be found in the show description. Session Share, for coaches, by coaches.
Welcome back. And as we continue to discuss academy development, and one thing is pretty evident in the game at the moment is a lack of strikers. If you go back, say, 10 years or so, you'd be able to have a wealth and eternity of strikers that you can name. And let's be perfectly frank, it's slim pickings right now. You've got teams like a Chelsea, like Josh's team. You've got a team like Arsenal, where people are always saying that they're just a striker away from being that team. And with the exception of probably Newcastle and Manchester City, how many world-class strikers are now left in the Premier League? Why do you think that is, Josh?
I think it's probably obviously everyone always says the hardest thing in football to do is score, so that's why they're so unique now. I think probably the way the football's gone a little bit. Obviously, probably 10, 15 years ago, the game used to be a little bit more direct. You used to see a lot more bigger physical strikers, and obviously there was a lot of strikers that would go around and score a load of goals and stuff like that. But if you think about it, you'd either have a big man that maybe wouldn't actually score that many goals, but their presence would be flicking the ball on or holding the ball up, and you'd be bringing other players into the game that they would be getting more goals around. Or a lot of teams back then used to play two up front as well, so you used to have a big man and a little man, as they say. Whereas now, don't really see teams play with two up front very often. Obviously, teams are now starting to defend in the 4-4-2 a little bit more often now, but obviously when they're attacking, it's still normally only one striker. Yeah, it's a hard one to see why it's kind of phased out a little bit. But I just think maybe the way the football's changed a little bit, focusing, it's gone a lot more technical. Obviously, the style in the Premier League's changed quite a lot, which obviously then filters down a little bit. But yeah.
I have a theory, the fact that since the game has changed, and I'm going to say this is like kind of a Guardiola influence, if you will. Like you see all the way through the whole football pyramid now, the fact that teams want to try and play in that style, in that frame of mind. And this is certainly not a dig at Guardiola because he's been massively successful and his influence on the game has been greatly seen, and it has developed the game. But I do think at the moment, I feel teams are stifling players for creativity. You mentioned like Bukayo Saka and like Arsenal in general earlier. I feel that when they get into wide areas, we've gone from the days of your David Ginola, for example, beating a player in the wing and putting crosses in, coming on the inside, taking a shot, really showing us that flair and creativity, to now being so scared about losing possession that every time they go one-on-one in the corner, they turn back around and drop that ball back. So now we've got a case of players playing more chess than jazz. So it's like it's a very slower game in terms of the final third, at least. And I saw an interesting statistic the other day, the fact that like 5, 10 years ago, the people that would touch the ball the most were your creative midfielders, like your Kevin De Bruyne, Bernardo Silva's, players along those lines, the players who we would consider the best in the world. Now we're seeing the fact that goalkeepers and centre backs are touching the ball more than anything. So, without being harsh to him, for example, Daniel Burns at Newcastle is touching the ball more than Isaac. You know, I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. So, I feel that due to this, do you think it's the game has changed so much that we are stifling the development, and our academies really making robotic players that are struggling with creativity now?
I actually don't think it's an academy problem. I think it's more of a first team problem. I think managers are obviously under so much pressure now, and it's a results business, especially when you get to the first team. So I actually think that you're in the academy, you hear the words like "be brave, be creative, go take your player on" and stuff like that. You still hear that. The coaches are less focused on the result; they're more focused on the player developing as an individual. But obviously, once they make the jump into the first team, it becomes a lot more restricted, a lot more structured, a lot more do this, do that. Um, and at the end of the day, it's because obviously I think the managers are under so much pressure to win. You see it all the time. The amount of managers that lose their jobs and stuff when they lose a few games become under pressure. I think it's that the balance now between that is the gap's massive, because I personally think that within the academy, coaches are still trying to have them players. Do you know what I mean? That's what everyone watches football for. You watch football for someone to take a player on and put it in the top corner or nutmeg someone, or that's what gets coaches off their seat. You enjoy watching players like that. So I don't think any coaches in the youth level and the academy level would be saying no to that. I just think it's the jump going into the first team. And if you actually watch, I do think when a young academy prospect makes the jump into the first team, one of the reasons why it's such a breath of fresh air is because they actually still have that, like, they still take players on and they look a little bit like fresh and stuff like that. And I guess the longer it goes on, then to kind of stay there, they have to then follow the plan and the structure a little bit more. So then maybe the creativity then gets lost a little bit.
That's really good to hear, because I do hope that there are coaches out there like myself that still enjoy that freedom, that creativity. That one of the things I've always loved for football, as opposed to American football, for example, that it's still a player game. You can give them as many ideas as possible, but at the end of the day, it's them truly making the decision. Whereas, like, you talk to American football, they've got the headsets on. It's just everything is like controlling a remote on FIFA, for example. So I'm really glad to hear that academies are doing that. Like I mentioned earlier, and I've mentioned many times on this podcast, people are probably sick of me saying it. I am a Villa fan, so I do bring up them a lot of time. And the reason I'm bringing it up this time is Morgan Rogers, for example, is a breath of fresh air in the Premier League. And people are talking about like him like moving up the levels. He came from Middlesbrough for a mere 8 million when like that was considered a lot of money for such a young, unachieved player. And now, like, there's been talked about him being linked to bigger clubs and everything like that. The reason I mention him, though, I just find it amazing that you hear people like a Gary Neville, a Jamie Carragher, all these people talking about him, and they're highlighting him because he can dribble. And I find that insane, because if you would have said that 5, 10 years ago, highlighting a player that can dribble, I think that would be incredible
Yeah,
because that should be one of the first things you're able to do as a player. Like we talk about it from U9 and upwards. So it's for me, it's about these academies, and I'm glad that you mentioned they are continuing to promote the player, to give them a personality, to create that next star that every single one of us will want to see week in, week out.
yeah, 100%. I think wide players, a midfielder, like dribbling, still a massive weapon, like to unlock a team. Do you know what I mean? If teams are sitting in, for example, in a low block and stuff, you need a little bit of magic where a player dribbles past someone and score. Like as a Chelsea fan and growing up, my favourite player for Chelsea watching has been Hazard because his dribbling ability was unbelievable, and people have actually knocked him for his goal contribution and maybe even assist at times. But if you actually watch him live, he's travelling 70 yards up the pitch, knocks it off to someone who then passes it to someone else, and then we score, for example. So he doesn't actually get the statistic or not, but he's been the one that's run around three players from his own box up to the final third kind of thing. So, yeah, it has gone a little bit away from that, and obviously, hopefully, can get it back to seeing more of that.
That's it. We want players like a Hazard that gets you off your seat, gets you excited to be at the game. So, Josh, this was excellent. Thank you very much. Josh is a good friend of the show, and we'll be sure to make sure we put all his socials in our podcast description so the listeners can follow him. Be sure to get in touch across all our socials to offer your opinion on everything that we've discussed today. We'd love to hear your thoughts, and we'd love to have some back and forth discussions about everything we've mentioned. This has been Session Share, the Coaches Podcast. Thank you very much, Josh, for coming back on the show. We look forward to having you again sometime.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And thank you for listening, and thank you for coaching the beautiful game.